Welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. My name is Krista Copper. I'm a bass player, and I've been involved in the theater world for about 10 years now. I have met so many amazing people who work in the theater world, and it's been such an honor to talk to some of them on the podcast. It's been an honor to meet new people and to reach out to people who live in different cities, who are in different stages of their career than I am. This episode will be the first episode to come out in 2021, and I have so many interviews that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So many interviews that have happened and so many interviews that I'm hoping will happen. I've been reaching out to just a lot of people, and I'm so looking forward to the potential of the episodes that will happen this year. I hope that you're able to find things to look forward to. I know it's been really frustrating for me to not be able to plan like a month in advance. I've been using this podcast as, the thing that I can look forward to and the thing that I can plan, because you can always do interviews. You could always talk with someone on the phone or or online. So I hope that you're able to find a project or something that can give you something to look forward to during a rough time. Today's my conversation with Paige Hernandez. I heard about Paige from another podcast that I've listened to for many years called Contrabass Conversations. Jason Heath is the host of that, and he interviewed a bass player named Chris Fun. And Chris, in his interview, mentioned his wife who worked in theater, which caused my ears to perk up. And so I looked her up and found out that she's amazing and does a lot of really great work in the theater world. And so I reached out to her. If you are a bass player or really even a musician, Contrabass Conversations is such a good podcast. It's been around for about 13 years, so it's been around for a really long time. I've reached out to Jason on many occasions, just asking for his advice and wisdom and knowledge in dealing with issues that come up with creating a podcast, and he's been a great resource for me for the Backstage Creative, and so I'm so appreciative of that. Check out the Chris Fun episode that he has. It's great. Chris is really articulate and has some really great views on the music world and creating albums and whatnot. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Paige Hernandez.
I am from Baltimore, but I actually live in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right outside of DC in Capitol Heights.
Okay, and then I was looking at your website a little bit ago. You do a lot in the theater world. What are some of the things that you do or are involved in?
Sure. Yes, I am considered a multi-hyphen in the theater world, which means I am a multidisciplinary artist. I started off as a performer, and then naturally dance and choreography was in there, and then directing and playwriting. Eventually, all of those skills would help me to develop my own company, B-Fly Entertainment, where I get to do all of those things.
Awesome. Why do you think you went from performing to more of like, I don't know, like administrative, design roles?
Yeah, it's a really great question because it's nothing that I intended to do. But I think I found that I wanted to learn and explore and dig deeper on those type of roles because they really helped me get a better grasp of my craft. I was really doing one side of it for so long, just performing. But once I started picking up other roles and creating and collaborating in a way where I had a true understanding of what those other roles entailed, things really soared for me. And it wasn't just because I was executing those roles, I just had a greater and deeper appreciation for my colleagues. And it really just set up some awesome collaborations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet. I would love to hear about your background, how you got into theater. Yeah, and just kind of how, like, where you went to school, if you went to school somewhere, and how you kind of got to where you are today.
Sure. My background, I was always pretty expressive and dramatic. I'd say for me, things began middle school with dramatic reading competitions. So, debate, forensics, oratory competitions, those were my jam. From those, I was winning all these competitions. I was winning nationwide competitions. And for a lot of folk who were on that circuit, they were like, the next really great natural next step might be theater for you to be able to really continue to do public speaking in a way that's as expressive as you are. So I went to high school in Baltimore, the Baltimore School for the Arts for theater, and then went on to get a degree in theater and broadcast journalism at the University of Maryland, College Park. All the while, still pretty much having minors in dance as well as foreign languages, and really just trying to put all of those things into the mix. So my career right now looks like all of those things: theater, dance, education, and how they kind of work in harmony and how they can support each other.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I really love theater is, all of these different disciplines, visual art, oral art, they all come together and they all have things in common. And I think theater really highlights that. And that's why I love it.
Yeah, yeah. It really can be that catch all. And just going back to what I was saying earlier, the different types of artists you meet in theater, the spectrum's really broad. It's been really great over the years to be able to meet so many different types of artists through theater.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I'd love to kind of dig a little deeper into like specific things. So I'd love to talk about, I haven't talked to very many people about choreography. So I'd love to hear, how does the choreography process work? Where do you start?
It's definitely different for each choreographer, and it also depends on your style or genre, your background, your makeup. But for me, my aesthetic, without a doubt, is hip hop. So hip hop choreography for me happens in a very unique way. It really starts with the story. Something that I've been really fortunate to be a part of is hip hop theater since the 90s, and being able to do it just up until COVID. But really, it's looking at the words on the page and thinking, how can I accent or punctuate what I'm saying with movement?
Hmm.
It's a way of seeing the story and not just hearing it. But what it does do by seeing and hearing it is enhances the feeling for it. So it evokes all kinds of emotion when you can choreograph from that kind of multi-tonal place. So for me, it starts with the words. I look at which words, for example, if we were doing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, I'm like, which of those words lends itself to movement? Definitely old. I could definitely embody old with my physical gestures or body. And I could probably do farm. And not just in a literal sense, but in an abstract sense. I can look like a barn house. I can also look like a garden growing. And from there, use those words to really identify the gestures I'll need and then take it further and put it into actual lyrical movement.
So when you're choreographing, is that kind of a process that you're doing kind of on your own? Are you choreographing with the dancers in the show? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's been a really fruitful combination of things. Sometimes I am just hired as a choreographer for a musical. But again, when I'm hired, I'm known for my hip hop aesthetic. So I'm able to bring that very specific style of choreography to the table. And then in other cases, it could be with the shows that I create, the choreography for myself, as well as if I'm doing a show with a collaborator, the choreography that we may do together. One of my favorite shows of mine is called the Nayaka Project, and it's a great collaboration with a great friend, Chitra Kalienderg, who is a classical Indian dancer. And she and I in this show go through classical Indian text using both hip hop and kuchipudi, which is a southern Indian dance style, to really explain and translate some of this classic text. But yeah, that would be probably my best example of my great wheelhouse. Where what, you're going to give me some text, it's pretty archaic, but you want me to make it fresh and hip and relatable and something that is palatable to anybody who sees it. I can do that with my body with hip hop.
Do you ever get stuck?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, forgive me if this comes across as like easy and natural and always well and successful, because it doesn't. So stuck for sure. I mean, speaking of that show, Nayaka Project, it was really a hard and difficult show. I got stuck a lot because It wasn't a culture I was familiar with, but not only that, the brevity of what we were talking about. It was almost like saying, I'm going to take the Bible or the Torah or the Quran and make it hip hop and crump all over it. People freak out because they think, maybe you are doing a disservice to that text or to that tradition or history. So I wanted to be very careful and very mindful. But what it meant is a lot of stuck moments, just being frustrated, wanting to make sure my intentions were clear, that I only support it and don't take away from it. So yeah, stuck a lot.
Do you have any like strategies for getting unstuck?
When you're with a collaborator, it helps just because in those stuck moments, having someone who was embedded in the culture and authentic to it could really continue to clarify things for me. On my own, I just have to walk away sometimes and completely break from it and come back to it refreshed or just, from a different headspace. A lot of times it's restless nights, Krista. I'm not gonna lie. Like I'll just be laying in bed, like, why can't I finish that combo or that script, or what am I missing, or what does that character need that I'm writing? Things come to me a lot in the shower, and they used to come to me a lot on a commute when I would drive. But I don't do much driving anymore, so there's a stuckness in that.
Hmm.
But yeah, change of pace or getting more clarity from a collaborator tend to help.
Yeah, I found moments when I get stuck in like an artistic project. I think a lot of times, I like as artists, we probably a lot of us get almost too deep into things
Mm.
and too deep into one headspace. And yeah, just like doing something different, going to a different room in the house, um, going to the grocery store.
Yeah,
I I think that sometimes so easy to get just like so sucked into one mindset when you're passionate about something, and that can be a source of
yeah,
stuckness.
it's true. Something else, just when you were saying that, if I revisit something in the vein or style that I'm trying to capture or just be a part of, that helps. So, for example, I'm doing a song that is similar to, you know, the melody of a Stevie Wonder song. Then I'll just go listen to some Stevie. You know what I mean? Just kind of
Mhm.
let that kind of inspiration take me away until I feel a little less stuck. But I can't imagine as a musician. Now that's a skill I don't have. What that's like. And as you may or may not know, my husband being a musician, his stuck is a whole different kind of stuck. I can't even talk him out of his stuck. So assume it's different for all kinds of artists.
Yeah, yeah, it's a personal thing. You like have to have find your own ways that work for you and your personality to kind of get where you need to go.
Yeah. And then you're using different sensory skill sets. So let me know what you do, but as a dancer, how I get physically unstuck, I think is different than a mental unstuck of writing. Is it the same for you?
Hmm. I don't know. That's a really good question. I really, for me, I think like I'm a runner, and so most of the times if I go on a run, whatever I'm stuck in,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's something musical or if I'm trying to write something, that'll usually help.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's kind of getting physical to get unstuck.
yeah,
Yeah,
to walk,
I
yeah,
know.
walk away, get away from the house, get
Yeah.
outside. That's a big part of it.
Get the blood running.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, focus on something else. It's kind of like that thing where, if you're in pain in one place, they say, "We'll get in pain somewhere else." And then all of a sudden that first pain doesn't matter as much. Yeah, it's kind of like that. But there's a better way to say that. I don't know why it came out that way.
Yeah, like work on another project and get stuck on that project, and then go to a
That's a
different
better
project
way to
and
say it.
get stuck on that project.
Oh, that's so much better. Uh-huh.
For me, that's why I also like to have a lot of things going at once.
Hmm.
Um, so like I'm not only working on one project, because then if I get stuck, then I don't have something else to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or if something fails, that really helps with failure too. Like, okay, well that thing failed. Well, I have this other project going, so it's fine. Or this project is, I don't feel like it's going anywhere. I'll just kind of shift and go over here for a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I am queen of all things multitasking, multidisciplinary, lots of irons in the fire. But you know what? What's interesting, since COVID, I find that, I don't get to sharpen that skill as much. My capacity is different. And so yeah, I'm not quite sure what that is, but it felt like where before I could spin a dozen plates, now I am content with spinning just six plates. Where I liked the challenge of that before, now it just all feels too stressful. So I've cut that in half. How about you? Do you feel like you're still having the same amount of kind of output and energy as before?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Um, because now my inspiration has to come so much from me instead of being out and gigging and playing with other people and um,
Mhm.
being, being in different theaters and different churches and different spaces. I'm not getting like as much like sensory input almost.
Yeah.
And so I'm not getting inspired from the places I'm playing or from the people I'm playing with. And so it feels like more work because it all has to come from me instead of,
Yeah.
feeding off of my community of musicians and artists.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting because my husband and I were talking about the role that audience plays in our work
Mm.
and just how much we miss them. And I don't think I knew in this moment how much I would miss it. It may not be surprising because you're like, oh, you're a performer. Of course, you miss your audience. But, with what I do, which is mostly for theater for young audiences, which usually entails 2,000 screaming kids on a field trip, having gotten off the bus and ate their lunch in the lobby, and then they come and see my one woman show. And it's completely interactive from top to bottom. And I need them. I need their energy. I need them to respond or not respond. The show that I'm referring to is called Havana Hop, and it's again for young audiences. And it's about a performer who has terrible stage fright and can't seem to build confidence. And essentially, what I've done in creating these interactions within the piece is it's kind of a device or a tool that makes the audience think that they are building my confidence, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So by the end, I go to do my final performance in the show, and the students are screaming from the audience, "You can do it! You got
Oh.
this! You're so good!" And of course, it's not a trick. It's all there intentionally, and it's supposed to be educational in that way. But it's so sweet to see how much they are capable of uplifting you and encouraging you and reassuring you of your strengths. And that's the part I miss. It's so yeah, the performance obviously, but to see students walk in and not know that they are going to be so instrumental to my success and how much it changes them over the course of 45 minutes. Oh, I miss it so much.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, my husband as a jazz musician, and he's a pretty introverted guy and doesn't really look up or make eye contact during his performances at any given night on any given club, but he's like amaze balls and everybody's in awe. But he would never know it because he doesn't really absorb it in that moment. But I think the pandemic has shown us and shown him specifically that yes, there is something there. It's very much a conversation. And like he says, regardless if the audience is actually listening to his solo or his improv in that moment, it still requires them. And just like improv requires others. And that's the kind of loss that we've both been kind of grappling with in this moment.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's super obvious, but it's not the same with like virtual streaming performances. It's not the same from a performance perspective. It's not like that live, like that energy, crackling in the air of every, hundreds of people being in a theater.
Hmm.
You can't get that any other
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up digital experiences because I've been doing a lot of them for the past few months. And it's so wild to have like a happy opening. I'm using air quotes, like virtual digital opening, and you're just in your home office or on the couch. I've got on a nice shirt and makeup, but like total sweats and PJs on the lower half. And then the thing is over, and you go to the kitchen and get an Oreo. And there's no more like, yay, you did it, or meet me at the bar, or let's go have some appetizers, or flowers and pomp and circumstance. It's literally like, okay, that is done. It's out in the world, and it's really immediately over.
hmm
Yeah.
Have you been performing in these experiences or organizing? What does your involvement looks like with like virtual performances?
Yeah, a little bit of both. As performer, and then in the pandemic, I recently took a role as associate artistic director at Everyman Theater in Baltimore, Maryland, which, as you mentioned before, puts me in a more administrative place, which means I help to curate a lot of those digital experiences now, organize them, get other performers ready for digital interaction. So, it's been really a crash course of a new medium, which again, I like the challenge. Initially, I was really excited about it, but there's a part of it that's also exhausting. And there's a part of it that feels like you are learning 12 to 15 different skills that no one can kind of understand, acknowledge, or compensate you for. um, so it's been a roller coaster. One of the great things that's come out of this is I developed a digital children's series called Paige and Friends for the National Theater in DC. And yeah, that was 3 30-minute episodes where I did everything. I am the talent, I am the writer, I am the lighting designer, producer, backdrop, video editor, um, you name it. And it felt like, I don't know, giving birth to an alien. Like, and in instead of 9 months, it was like 1 month. And I was joking with friends that I went to YouTube University because I had to like learn on the fly from a whole bunch of YouTube videos how to do everything. And then holding myself to expectations pre pandemic, in terms of quality and thoroughness and intention, and realizing that they don't land the same in this moment. So it's a lot. I mean, I literally have imposter syndrome every day. And then realize it's not so bad. Why am I, thinking this hard about it? Because it feels like audiences are just eager to interact, period. And they're not necessarily looking for the same quality as live performance, but just something that gives them the same feeling. It's a lot, Krista, but I think I'm preaching to the choir, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Do you feel like what you've been doing, in the digital space has been effective?
Yeah. And it's hard to know its long term impact, but in the moment, it feels pretty darn great and effective. When I created one of those episodes for Paige and Friends, I still have an agent, which is great. And my agent was able to book it so that I could do an assembly. Get this, Krista, an assembly for 400 fourth graders on Zoom.
Oh my.
Yeah, and it looked like the 30-minute episode plays. They all watch it on Zoom, and then we talk about it and kind of unpack it for another 30 minutes. And I was like, what is this? What is this world? Like, what is happening? And in that moment, when you're swiping your Zoom 5 times to see 400 students, you see how impactful it is. You see the students getting up in their homes and dancing and singing along. But yeah, again, will they remember it as much as when they took the field trip to the theater to see it? Is it something that will stick in their memories? Or is it something that just feels like overload in a time where they're in front of a screen 4 to 8 hours a day? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, when things open back up and live performances are happening regularly again, if some of the work, the skills that people have been developing, like you said, to make digital things happen, if some of that will keep going on, like if people will still keep doing digital productions, or if we'll just be like, nope, that's over, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I
hope
don't know.
so. It's interesting because even though I feel all stuck, we should just name this episode Stuck. Stuck in the digital kind of impact of this, I still very much love its accessibility.
Hmm.
I love that in an instant I can put something up and it has international attention. And that 400 students can watch it for free by just clicking a link. They don't need subsidized buses or lunches paid for or any of those things. So I'm hoping that the future looks like a combination of live and digital, that we begin to think more about how can we always have two parallel paths of programming or content that suits everyone's needs, so that if you're able to come in person and maybe you recognize that coming in person is more valuable for your own enjoyment, but yes, you have that option to come in person, or I can't leave my home, I'm in another state, but I can still enjoy this artist from abroad, or both. But yeah, I think the option of both moving forward feels really substantive to me.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. Are there any, how do I say this, like pitfalls that maybe you fell into when you were trying to navigate the digital space that you could warn people about, or any, tips or tricks that you've picked up along the way that could help other people who are also trying to figure it out?
Yeah. When it comes to like equipment and just gear, don't buy everything first. Kind of buy it as you need it, or buy it as you are able to pay for it. Because initially I did that and I just had tons of stuff that either didn't suit my needs or I had to keep returning. And then you can get lost in that sauce quickly too. And I just found that I could do what I needed to do with much simpler equipment and gear than what I was actually getting information to do, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So someone might say, "Oh, you need a ring light and two umbrella lights and this kind of microphone and this kind of laptop." And I was able to find just, one light and one thing, and I don't need umbrella lights. And actually this mic I have is already pretty good, and just because it's a lot to invest on the front end. So that's a gear thing. And then creatively, I just always go back to intentionality. I really make sure to write it down. A lot of what I did for Paige and Friends wasn't scripted so much as it was an outline, because I wanted that intentionality there. I want to make sure to really repeat things that are important or meaningful that you're supposed to take away from this, so that it doesn't just seem like rambling. So I hope that's helpful. And that's definitely from a kind of theatrical perspective.
Yeah, I'm all about like as simple as technology as possible.
Yes, yes. Yep. Money doesn't help it, actually. I mean, in terms of like, I thought I needed the $200, $300 lights, and you just don't. Natural
Hmm.
light can work wonders.
Hmm. Yep. So in your writing, are you usually writing a play for something specific, or like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does the play come first and then the opportunity, or does the opportunity come first that you write a play for? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely shifted over the years. So, initially, when I was first starting out with my company, which is almost 10 years ago now, it was writing to fill a void, meaning as a woman of color, I was not seeing the kind of representation that I wanted to see on stage. So I started with two pieces that looked like, well, what do I want to see? And, if I could be that walking, talking, living representation of that, how would that translate onto paper? And that's how it started. And that's actually what garnered me the most success and momentum and lucrativeness. And then from there, it switched to commissions. So this is usually an organization that has already experienced my first few works, who want me to write something in the same, again, aesthetic or style or vein of those earlier works, but that actually speak to specific themes. So, case in point, I was commissioned by the Glimmerglass Festival, which is an opera company in upstate New York, to write a hip opera. And at the time, their operatic season's theme was home. So they were doing Porgy and Bess and a few other pieces that really looked at home. So I wrote Stomping Grounds. And this was, again, a 50-50 hybrid of opera and hip hop that really looked at home, in the current now versus a Porgy and Bess or from, a prior time period. And yeah, if you told me I was going to write a hip opera that was completely in verse, that was going to be dealing with home, I don't think I could have generated that on my own. But you know what could? A check, a big check,
Yeah.
a big old check, and a deadline. Those are really all the fire I need to just say, I can do this. I can find a way to make this vehicle work for this particular genre. And it's definitely one of the pieces I'm most proud of. I really want tons and tons of people to be able to experience it. I don't think it's actually had its life yet, even though it had its world premiere. It was still very pocketed. It's one of those stories that, yeah, I'd love for the world to experience. So yeah, and I mean that holds as much weight for me as an original piece where I sat down and wrote it 10 years ago versus a piece that I thought I was just doing for the paycheck of it and ended up loving it.
Mm-hmm. I have about 5 questions in my head at once, so I'm trying to figure.
I know. It's totally like artist conundrum too, to be asked to do work where you're like, oh Lord. And then it ends up being dope and you're like, whoa. And then the money question, which feels soul sucking, but also a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the things.
Yeah. What have you learned about putting a price on your work or asking for more money? What have you learned about and navigating that over the years?
I have learned, Krista, that you always undersell yourself.
Hmm.
Like, I learned I always undersold myself to the point where eventually something just snaps and you end up asking for, I'm giving my Dr. Evil Finger $3 million. Because you're like, okay, all they can say is no and go down from here. But I think for a long time, I was starting at the base and hoping folks would go up, and putting that much trust into others about your worth is never a good thing. So, yeah, in general, with negotiations, and I have to say, I've learned a lot from my agent, and I'm grateful for him and these lessons. I like to let them start. They know their budget. You're guessing in the dark. And then starting negotiations from there. And then doing a lot of research, comparison. What did that director get who did this show? What was their resume and reputation like when they did it? So there's a lot of that. But then it just boils down to your mental health. So, what I mean by that is, do I really want to take this project on right now? And what would it take for me to say yes? So, when I'm so busy and I originally was spinning 12 plates, and someone comes along and wants me to spin a 13th plate, it's going to be a high price,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to get the same deal that plate number 1 got. So it's kind of a combination of those things, but yeah, I don't know if it's something that you can kind of gain instantly, this idea of self-worth and knowing, what you will say yes and no to. And it plays in the opposite end of that too, where, I used to have a problem for a long time not being able to say no, because that's also a question of your worth. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm making a quadrillion dollars with this organization, so I can do these 5 free gigs. Yeah, no. It never works out in the end, and you're exhausted and you're not giving 100% to each project. It all shows up in the rents. So yeah, and I'm still learning. I'm still not great at it.
Hmm. That's an interesting concept. Like, I always kind of think of it as like, this is my flat rate. But I like that idea of like, oh, I'm really busy right now. I'm going to ask for a little more. Huh. That's
Uh-huh.
interesting.
Uh-huh. And usually you'll find that they're so desperate they'll say yes. Because they're like, oops, it was my bad that I waited this long to get on your radar. And now you're crazy busy. But no one can do it like you can do it. And then I just put up the Dr. Evil finger and asked for $3 million.
Yeah.
And they're like, 3,000. Yeah, so it's a process, and I'm still learning.
And that's cool, like with kind of your niche that you've kind of carved out for yourself, like having kind of a unique, specific thing that you do, like hip hop, that probably helps with that too, like, yeah, when you're doing something different or unique.
Yeah, it's true. Yep. And the fact that I'm a woman of color, a woman of a certain age, all of those things kind of factor in because, I've heard everything. I get commissioned sometimes for hip hop theater where they're like, if you are of a certain age, you're not necessarily listening to what current hip hop charts are, So there's all kinds of assumptions that come into play. And I realize that, yeah, when people are making those pitches, they are like checking those boxes. And for that, I'm a unicorn. And that's great. And then sometimes in conversations with these pitches, I realize, or even they realize, they didn't need all those boxes checked. And there's about 2 dozen other people who do what I do, and maybe even better. So again, it's just the clarity of coming to, what you want, what I want, what the audience wants, who we're speaking to. I laugh because when I wrote that opera, the opera audience was not at all expecting or wanting this.
I could imagine.
Fun times. So, it's funny because as wild and what feels like it could be belittling as that is, it really gave me a lot of freedom. I mean, I really could be what I wanted to be.
Hmm.
Because I didn't know any different.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I think filling a void and having a certain niche is definitely helpful in certain times. And then yeah, you see how it plays out.
Yeah. You've mentioned having, imposter syndrome feelings, or, when you could tell that they picked you because of your race or gender, kind of navigating insecurities. Or I know for me as like a female bass player, like sometimes I just wonder, like, do I belong here? Not very many people
Hmm.
like me in this field. Do I really belong here? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's been an underlying theme in pretty much all of my work, this idea of am I enough and do I belong? And for the majority of my life, I mean, even now, it's still the case. But I think I've learned how to play the game a little differently. Used to walk into rooms and ask those questions. But now I had to commit to myself and say, Paige, if you say yes, you are already enough and you do belong. Because otherwise, you shouldn't say yes.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, you're just making yourself go through the mental hurdles and Olympics. It just gets super messy. And it's, again, it's easier said than done. But I actively have to take up more space. I actively, when I'm in a rehearsal room, have to force myself to speak up, and my heart will be banging out of my chest and my armpits will be soaked. But I'm like, I am in here because they asked me to be here and I'm being paid to be here, which means my expertise is needed. I have to embrace that. And again, I don't do it well, but it's just a shift in perspective that I've had probably within the last 5 to 6 years. Because yeah, I was going around like, am I enough? Am I enough? Do I belong? And the minute that doubt creeps in front of others, when you're being asked to execute your best, it shows up. And I was really trying to combat that. Like, how can I make sure these weaknesses don't get the best of me? in performance, in creation. And it meant that I had to take up more space.
Mm.
And if I felt like I didn't want to take up space because that's even exhausting and that is where the imposter stuff comes in, then I don't need this job right now. And that sounds really privileged because I always need the money. I'm definitely not Scrooge McDuck here in Capitol Heights. But I also know that I don't want to cry in my car outside of rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to eat a whole box of Cheez-Its on the way home. Like, and I had to start thinking about how much is that worth? You know, my like all of the coping mechanisms over time. And they cost a lot. They didn't cost a lot when I was younger, but now they cost a lot. Again, it's not a magic button. It's just the way I'm trying to approach things now in an effort to really be as present and as full as possible. And I know that I'm a better collaborator that way. When I show up with an idea and a spark and I want others to jump in on it versus, oh, excuse me, hi, I was thinking maybe, and it gets shut down, you know? So all the things. And I can't front either that I think being in pandemic times is a bit of a backpedal because I think I was walking into those rooms just as I'm describing pretty strongly, accurately, 100% in February. But I don't know if February 2021, I'm going to walk into the room with the same strength.
Hmm.
You know, I think I built it up and I don't know how long it built me. Did it take me my whole career or was it just the past few months? I don't know. But losing this moment of interaction with people, I haven't been able to exercise the muscle. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, the courage muscle.
The courage muscle, the no fucks given muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need some more practice. So,
Yeah, when I've walked into rooms and just felt, and not every room I walk into, I'm the only female. Not every room I walk into that's all male, I feel insecure. But times when I have felt insecure, my mantra is like, you have nothing to prove. You have nothing to prove. They're not like,
mm-hmm.
you have to do your best by your standard. And for me, I have to turn inward, like focusing on why I love what I do and why I love to make music with others. And that's what helps me is like kind of turning inward to my own center and not
Mm-hmm.
worrying so much about how different I look.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all a game.
Yeah. Yep.
So you never know what cards you're going to be dealt because,
Mhm.
yeah, you look different, you seem different, you are different. And then someone throws you some card down that's like, oh, also racism, also sexism, also classism, also, you know what I mean? And you're like, whoa, 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 as all these cards are being thrown at you. And yeah, you could, what I just said could totally be 100% bullshit because any of those cards could knock you down. So yeah, it's just playing the game. And as an artist, that's all I can honestly commit to doing. And some days and some projects, I play the game really well. And some projects, I'm like, nope, got the best of me.
Yeah, it's messy. Like life is life and projects and creativity and art. It's all messy.
Right. We didn't get into this for the stability of it, the sameness of it.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's also what makes it thrilling. And I have to say, as a creative in this moment, I'm excited by the changes that are happening. I don't know if they're going to stick. I don't know if ultimately they're going to improve everything. I'm speaking specifically about changes in the theater industry, entertainment industry in general, but specifically theater. Just being more inclusive and mindful and anti racist, breaking down structures that were harmful to a lot of people involved, long hours, late hours, low pay, messy unions. All of these things right now are having some sort of awakening and I'm for it. I don't know how long this process is going to be. I don't know if we'll see all of these things through, but I like the shift of it all. That excites me.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential in this moment, and hopefully the industry will be taking advantage of that potential, and not letting it pass us by.
Yeah, I really hope so. We'll see, because while the industry may not want to do the hard, intricate and intense work of breaking something down to build it back up, I think its workers and its artists are going to continue to call them out and make them accountable to the point where they won't have a choice. So one way or another, something's got to give.
Mm-hmm. And I so admire the work that you're doing. You said you didn't see yourself, so then you started your own company, and I just some of what it takes is people saying, okay, I don't see myself in this space. I'm gonna step into that space and be seen for other people who are following behind me. Um,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I admire your courage and your bravery and your willingness to step into that space.
Thank you. Thanks. It's not an easy job, but it's fulfilling. That's for sure. I heard something in a meeting last week that was like, when you're in a difficult position in a certain room, just remember all the people who can't be in that room that you're in that room for.
That's good.
And that, yeah, right? I was like, that's really awesome, because there's so many times where I just want to throw in the towel, or curse somebody out, or just get ugly. You know what I mean?
Uh huh.
And if I stop and think, like, yes, I am the only person of color in this room, or I am the only woman in this room, or I am the whatevs, and there's so many women or black people or Latinx people who can't be in this room. And here I am. So, do I choose to, this goes back to that earlier point, just stay quiet and observe, which there's a lot of great strategy in that, or do I stand up and take space?
Yeah. I have one final question that I like to ask everyone, and that's advice for young people. And you do a lot of things. So usually I like to do specific, like advice to young stage managers. But since you do so much, advice for young people who are interested in pursuing a career in the theater industry, what advice would you give them?
To stay involved. I think this is a very unprecedented and unique time to tap out. But because the changes are so seismic and they're happening so constantly and frequently, and probably more impact than they'll ever kind of happen, these changes, it's important to know what's going on, so that when you do decide to pick it up again or go full fervor at it again, you're not catching up, and you're able to kind of, have a running start. So that's specifically for this moment. And then my other advice would be to just continue to create daily, if not weekly, if not monthly. Once a month's fine too. Whatever you're able to do as a survivor of a pandemic, just be able to create. Don't let it go stale or stagnant for longer than it has to. And for me, that looks like a combination of just trying to dance every day, even if it means my living room kicking my dog because he won't stop velcroing to me, or writing something down, or taking a walk and recording it in my phone, ideas, concepts. Another great thing I heard, I'm like totally full of the gems today. Look at me. Last week was, it was something like, if you write something down, the odds of you achieving it are 20%. If you write something down and say it aloud, it's 60%. If you write something down, say it aloud, and tell someone else, it's 90%. That's crazy. So I keep trying to put that in mind, because I'm like, okay, I have an idea. I'm going to write it down. And then eventually I'm like, that idea is pretty dope. And I say it out loud, like, I'd like to write that play by the end of the year. And then eventually I'm on a Zoom happy hour with a friend, and I'm like, so I have this idea. And hoping that, yes, putting it into the universe means it'll definitely come into fruition.
Yeah, I think the fight to keep creating during this time will be worth it. Probably most of us, if not all of us, are struggling to stay engaged, but I think I don't know, but I think that if we keep fighting to do creative work, even if it doesn't get published, even if no one sees it, like I think we'll be glad that we did.
Yeah, we'll be sitting on like the biggest libraries, like Prince, where like we have enough work for a lifetime, and we're just waiting to get paid. Yeah.
Waiting to get paid. That would be a great album title. Waiting to get paid.
Oh yeah, that would be.
Or a play. I don't know. Someone take that idea and run with it. Waiting to get
Oh,
paid.
that makes me think of my husband because I know at the end of every gig he's like literally waiting to get paid.
Yeah. Yep. Standing around.
Like I'm just waiting to get paid. If I had $1 every time I read that text, I'd be rich.
The music for the backstage creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Carly Wagner.